Hi, I'm Marc, and welcome to the weekly Outside Views report on European politics. In the Netherlands, the dramatic defeat of the governing coalition in provincial elections has triggered a political earthquake. The four parties in Prime Minister Marc Rutte's centre-right coalition not only lost significantly in the country's 12 provinces, but also in the first chamber of the national parliament, which is comparable to the German Bundesrat, for example. According to Thursday's projections, they will only hold just under a third of the mandates there. They ended up far from the majority required for legislative decisions. The losses endanger the stability of the government of right-wing Prime Minister Rutte. The day after the election, newspapers spoke of a historic memo and a settlement with the Rutte government. The outstanding winner is the new right-wing populist farmer citizen movement BBB. They stood for the first time in the parliamentary elections in 2021 and achieved 1% of the vote at the time. According to the preliminary final result of Wednesday's provincial elections, the BBB became the strongest political force by far and straight away in many provinces. Because of the acute shortage of skilled workers in various sectors, the British government wants to let more foreign construction workers, roofers and craftsmen into the country. That's according to a budget presented by Chancellor of the Exchequer Jeremy Hunt this week. This provides for the list of shortage occupations for which simplified visa requirements apply to be expanded by 5 craft occupations. The measure stands in stark contrast to the Conservative government's otherwise restrictive migration policy. Hunt promised not to solve the problem of the millions of job vacancies in the UK through what he calls unlimited migration. In his lengthy speech on the budget on Wednesday, there was no mention of the additional visa facilitation though. A BBC presenter on Thursday described it as a hidden story of the budget. Asked whether Brexit supporters might feel cheated by this, Hunt just justified himself. Those who voted for Brexit said they wanted to control migration, not to stop it completely. The list of shortage occupations is to be revised again this autumn. A number of sectors are demanding an expansion of the professional groups in order to be able to recruit foreign skilled workers. After the pension reform was pushed through in France without the final approval of Parliament, what is probably President Emmanuel Macron's most important project is not yet completely sealed. No confidence motions against the government by the opposition are expected by today when I'm filming this. This had pushed through the raising of the retirement age from 62 to 64 on Thursday at the last minute with the help of a special article in the Constitution without a vote. They weren't sure of a majority in the National Assembly, and although the conservative Républicains had initially signaled support for the president's centre camp, this then crumbled. Left and right-wing nationalists have already announced no confidence motions now. These must be available by Friday afternoon at the latest and will be voted on in the coming days. However, it is considered unlikely that the government will be overthrown. The president of the Républicains, Éric Ciotti, has already stated that his group will not support a motion of no confidence. It remains to be seen whether all MPs will comply. After the government's decision to implement the reform in the short term without a vote, thousands of people flocked to protests on the Place de la Concorde in the center of Paris. Wooden pallets were set on fire. The riot police came and cleared the place in the evening. Protests also broke out in other French cities. According to President Andrzej Duda, Poland wants to hand over 4 MiG-29 fighter jets to Ukraine in the coming days. More MiG-29s are currently being serviced and prepared for a later transfer. That's what Duda said in Warsaw on Thursday after meeting with Czech President Petr Pavel. The country's leadership made a corresponding decision and the government then passed a resolution. Duda further said that the Polish Air Force currently has about a dozen MiG-29s, which were taken over from East Germany stocks in the early 1990s. They continue to be in full service as working MiGs for our anti-aircraft defense, they said. The machines handed over to Ukraine are to be replaced by modern fighter jets, which Poland ordered from South Korea and the USA. Spain's left-wing government has passed a controversial pension reform that, although approved by the unions, has been sharply criticized by business people and the conservative opposition. The project was approved by the Council of Ministers in Madrid on Thursday. The decree still has to go through Parliament. There, however, the minority government of Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez is often supported by smaller formations. With the pension reform, Madrid is fulfilling a requirement of the European Union, which had made further payments of funds from the Corona Reconstruction Fund dependent on it. They also want to ensure that the pension system remains financially viable. The biggest challenge is the approaching retirement of the so-called baby boomers. Russia has once again exported grain from the occupied Ukrainian territories by ship. Wheat was exported via the port city of Berdyansk on the Sea of Azov, the Ukrainian General Staff said in its evening report on Thursday. A loaded Russian barge was escorted out of the port by several tugboats. The Moscow-appointed head of the Zaporizhia region, Yevgeny Balisky, had previously written on the Telegram news channel that the port was being prepared for grain exports. In total, it is planned to export 2 million tons of grain by ship and by rail from the Russian-controlled part of the region. 500,000 tons are intended for personal use. Large parts of the arable land in the Zaporizhia and Cherson region of southern Ukraine were conquered by Russia over a year ago. Kiev has repeatedly denounced the Russian practice of exporting and selling grain from the occupied territories. Ukraine is missing out on important export earnings there. The Baltic states of Estonia and Lithuania will continue to provide military aid to Ukraine in the fight against Russia. The Estonian government on Thursday decided to supply semi-automatic rifles, sniper rifles, sights, binoculars, ammunition, individual and special equipment, patrol boats, and thermal imaging cameras. Lithuania's new aid package includes 155mm ammunition, vehicles, and troop rations, as Defense Minister Arvydas Anušauskas wrote on Twitter. According to the Ministry of Defense in Tallinn, Estonia's military aid for Ukraine will thus increase to a total value of almost 400 million euros. Lithuania's military aid is expected to reach 450 million euros soon. Sweden increasingly expects that it could only be accepted into NATO after Finland. The signs of the past few weeks indicate that Turkey is preparing to ratify Finland's accession before Sweden's, as Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson said on Wednesday during a visit to German Chancellor Olaf Scholz in Berlin. "We are also prepared for this situation," said Kristersson, but made no secret of the fact that Sweden would prefer joint accession with Finland. "We believe that we are ready for ratification, but we respect only Turkey can make Turkish decisions," he said. In Poland, inflation accelerated again in February. Consumer prices rose by 18.4% compared to the same month last year, as the Central Statistical Authority announced in Warsaw on Wednesday. In January, the inflation rate was 16.6% year-on-year. Compared to the previous month, consumer prices rose by 1.2% in February. The cost of food and non-alcoholic beverages rose in particular. Consumers had to spend 24% more on these than in February last year. Transport costs rose by 23.7% over the same period, while housing and energy sources rose by 22.7%. The Russian Navy wants to equip its submarines with modern hypersonic weapons. "Let no one doubt that we are doing this," said the head of the Navy Nikolai Yevmenov in an interview published in the army newspaper Krasnaya Zvezda on Friday. The admiral did not specify a date for the conversion of the submarine fleet to the new missiles. According to him, there are currently around 10 submarine types in service, belonging to 4 different generations. The modern guided missiles of the Caliber type have been tested on second-generation submarines, and today all submarines in service can be equipped with it, including strategic submarines, he said. The next step would then be to upgrade with hypersonic missiles, according to Yevmenov. And this concludes this week's report on European politics, but you find another one right here in the end screen. I'll see you there. I'll be back.